Part 2 on day 35. Now, as I said, I'm digging the synchronicity of what's happening to me right now in relation to my birthday just being, and equinox yesterday. Yesterday it was 55 days exactly till my finishing date on the 88 days. And having this little relapse is which I'm going to talk about further, is all part of the process, and hopefully this is also in lieu with helping anybody who might be picking up on some of the things that I'm saying, and implementing some kind of a change in their diet or way of living, be it smoking, drinking, or overeating, whatever the case may be. This is the whole idea of this podcast. Apologies for being missing for 3-4 days, but it just I was out and about, and it wasn't it didn't feel possible being in the kind of state that I was in, and in relation to some of the things I'm going to share with you now. I ended up having the following day, the big breakfast, the full Monty, with everything from the black pudding to the white pudding to the bacon and sausage. And so I'd convinced myself somehow that I was already in, and that another day would do me no harm. And then there's this part of me, I suppose, that is just, that kind of addiction to those tastes and those, those wants and desires towards, the meat and the bread and the egg and stuff like that, And so, I got caught up with the various smells and reality of just losing my will, I suppose, and awareness and weakness and so on in relation to what happened. And then suddenly it was later on the day, it was all right for me to have a bit of sugar. And I've had very little sugar over the last 3 or 4 months. Again, it slipped in some way where I was convinced that I was already in for the day, and in for a penny, in for a pound. And so this lasted for about 3-4 days, up until yesterday. And the night before the equinox, I was hanging out some beautiful people, and it was interesting again to observe being in the presence of people having a smoke and having a drink and stuff like that, and almost around people who were not that too far away from me and in my understanding and the scope of things and stuff. So it's amazing, really, how what comes to mind now in relation to how we really can help each other is on one level. I feel a little bit disappointed myself that I didn't hold myself to a better being stronger and less weak in that continuation of those people who are obviously being inspired by me in some way, and this stands for all of us. If we want our children to be a certain way, we need to act that out, even though they might not get it till they're teenagers or older, or maybe go through a whole process of down the rabbit hole themselves to figure things out. Certainly they might get it a lot quicker, they might get it immediately, but more so if we're living it ourselves. So this is how inspiration works, and this is how leading by example works, and we don't often realize how much we're inspiring other people until we fall ourselves, and as soon as we do, we kind of they often follow suit then, because they have this bit of respect for us, and they realize that it's happened to me before, where people I respect are on it, and I see them letting their hair down, and it allows me to feel like it's justified to do something like that. Let my hair down, have a drink, have a smoke, whatever the case may be, and it's interesting how this energy works, So ultimately, we're all in a battle here in relation to the different levels of where we're at and what we allow ourselves, and how we level ourselves out with our addictions, you know, because once you're in the coffee, uh, uh, you know, daily coffee drink, you know, it's what you do. You have to get that coffee in you before you can operate first thing in the morning, and in the same way as how you relax with that smoke in the evening, you know, or having that alcohol, or going out and socializing and needing that drink to be able to have the confidence to speak, or, you know, all these things, however we use them, you know. Now there are obviously often dangerous side effects to that, you know, hangovers and various habits and addictions that can then be picked up to a degree where suddenly we might wake up in 20 years time and realize that we're an alcoholic, you know. So obviously, you know, there are people who have great control over their faculties and their will. And you know, some people seem to do really well, you know, where they don't really have much of a problem, and they're able to enjoy all the fruits of bounty of nature, you know, whatever that is, you know, and don't have that kind of strange, you know, head guilt and shame, or, you know, whatever it is that we do in relation to figuring out whether something is good or bad. Now, you know, as I said before, we've talked about this in relation to, um, the strain that it has on Mother Earth, you know, because it's huge, you know, and some of the things that we can do in order to, you know, take that first step, you know, in changing our whole mental attitude towards, just looking at everything, you know, in relation to 1 + 1 = 2, you know, there is certainly, you know, as somebody has suggested recently, that, you know, we don't need to mine for metal anymore. We have enough metal in the world now to you know, it's everything that we need in whatever it is that we mine is already above above land, you know. And you know, with the right kind of technology and willpower and togetherness, you know, we can recycle just about everything, you know. So, you know, this is an interesting concept or idea, you know, to how we think and feel about things, you know, in relation to upcycling, you know, and recycling and so on, you know. It's interesting, you know, because ultimately, if we are, as I predict, making our way slowly back to the land, for that reason of, none other than, you know, time management and energy and health and all these things, you know, that are relevant towards this, you know, because, you know, how difficult it is, you know, to, you know, live in opposition to, you know, so it's very much like that, I think, you know, for a lot of people. The feeling is survival. We're in survival mode. We're not in living mode, and often enough, it doesn't really make any difference how rich or poor you are. You know, sometimes being poor is actually you're rich, you know, because you have more awareness around the things that you do, you know, and often there's a slightly little bit more synchronicity and magic to your daily life, you know. Whereas money itself, you know, having loads of money and you know, not having to do those basic things, you know, that a lot of people have to, you know, work in, you know, especially if it's a laboring job, you know. The exercise can be very beneficial, you know. So, you know, it's not all bad in this way. It's just the amount that we have to do in relation to, you know, 9-hour, 10-hour, 12-hour shifts, which then in turn means we don't have the energy to educate our children, or play with them, or be with them in a correct manner. And often then there's a lot of stress because of the imbalance of these things, you know. So in the same way, you know, it's you know, money, having excessive amounts of money can just buy more and more weapons of mass distraction, you know, because you know, you're it doesn't mean, you know, you're living. You could, you know, it's the same with people who have a 1,000-acre estate, or you living on the beach, beachfront property, you know. You might desire and want these things, and you might get these things and earn these things even, you know. and through your own endeavors of hard work and maybe not, maybe it's manipulation for some people, you know, to the highest degree, where you've walked all over and trampled all over all sorts of people in order to get there. But ultimately, either way, you know, good or bad, in whatever way you did in order to get those things, you could quite easily be one of those who you know, doesn't enjoy the fruits of those labors, those scenes. There's you know, you could quite well be on the beachfront and not watch a sunset or a sunrise, and have the most fantastic view of a window that you never look out, you know, and never spend time meditating on, you know. And same, you could have 1,000 acres and you could all this land and all this beautiful woodland and gardens that you never spend time in. So, you know, the poor man, the so-called poor man, you know, who's the servant, perhaps in those particular areas, you know, it could be anybody. You know, you could be the gardener, you know, working in a fancy estate, you know, but because of this job, you know, you're getting to walk the land and you know, breathe in the beautiful smells of such a place, and catch the sunset and the sunrise and all those things, you know. Or you may just be a troubadour of some sorts, you know, who goes from place to place and lives quite humbly, you know, gets to constantly experience nature in that way, where the feeling is that all the land is yours. You don't need to own a piece of land, you know. And rightfully so, you know, in a sense, isn't that what it is, you know? You know, like the Native Americans say, you know, we can't own the lands. We cannot own the land. The land. We are just custodians, you know, just guardians. And I love that about people, especially like Dave Clark, you know, who runs the Festival of Fires on his land in Ishnok, you know. The feeling is then that he feels like he's a guardian to the land. And we need guardians, you know, just, you know, even if they have a piece of paper, which is the deeds to that land that was passed on to them by their family, you know, I'm okay with that too, you know, as long as the person isn't keeping it all to themselves and has decided that they own the land and you know, we know those kind of people who stick up the barbed wire fences and have the big fancy electronic gates and so on, and you know, and just keep everything to themselves, you know. You know, and in England we have a lot of national trust properties now and English heritage, and you know, at least in England, you know, you can walk via stiles, you know, like up and over the fence. There's rite of passage, you know. There's a huge amount of walkways, even through rich man's land, the elite, you know. And these public footpaths are everywhere, all along the coastline, up and through the centres, you know, through farmers' land, you know, and it's fantastic. Whereas here, and I don't get this, you know, in relation to the problem that some people have, you know, against the English or the British or whatever, and I just think, well, I've never seen people so uptight and so you know, possessive over the land as I have in this country. And we don't have the same styles and rite of passage or walkways or public footpaths, you know. The whole country, half the country seems to be shut down. So, you know, I'd like to see a change in this. How are we going to make a change in this? You know, as an example of this thing that we do, you know, in us and them. So there's a lot of tightness here, a lot of, you know, anality and stuff, you know, and I don't know what the right word for it is, you know, possessiveness, you know, and it's mine, you know, and a real lack of sharing in that, you know. So yeah, I question St. Patrick's Day and this, and of course it's great to celebrate, and the Irish are famous for, you know, any excuse for a piss up, you know, and this is all fine, well and dandy and stuff like that, you know, but you know, I would like to get onto this at some point in relation to especially alcohol, you know, and you know, it's a problem. It's a problem. Everybody can be all cheery and great for the camera and so on down the pub, the life and soul of the party, but nobody talks about what goes on behind closed doors, you know, the skeletons in the closet, and there's a lot, you know, the depression or the violence and aggression or stuff that comes from some of this excessive amounts of alcohol and so on. So we're moving into part 3, and this is going where it's going.